One. Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Directors of PART, Thursday, July 2023. It is approximately 9:05 a.m. I will begin by first taking the roll. Kika Bukowski,
Present.
Anthony Alto,
Present.
Michelle Chun Brungraber,
Present.
Mark Howland,
Present.
Natalie, I saw her. Hi, Natalie.
I'm here.
Natalie Wassa, virtually.
Here, thank you.
Roger Morton,
Present.
Joe O'Donnell,
Present.
Ed Sniffen. Don Nataki Uchiapuna is excused for now. Art Tolentino
Present.
and Robert Yu.
Present.
And the chair is present. We almost have a full contingent. Thank you very much. Now I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Before we begin, is there anyone here, in person, who would like to testify on any agenda item that we have listed? Please note that we will call for testimony as we reach each agenda as well. Anyone here? Cindy, anybody? And no one has submitted. So with that, because of potential scheduling issues, which we may not have, is that true? Because Robert said he probably will not have a scheduling issue. Do we have any time? We're time? Okay, then we'll just go in order of the agenda. So the executive director's update, we'll throw it to you, Lori.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Board. Just wanted to say thank you to all of you. That grand opening ceremony, Roger, you and your team did terrific. Most of you were there at the ceremony. A few of you couldn't make it, but just wanted to thank you folks for helping us get that grand opening done, getting us to that point. Second item, the FTA quarterly was done a couple of weeks ago. There was nothing out of the ordinary. They also were interested in the grand opening, so we did take them on a pre-ride, and then Amy, the deputy administrator, Region 9 administrator, was able to stay and made her remarks at the grand opening. STG lawsuit, I did send you folks an email, but we have it also as an agenda item so we can get into more detail with that, Chair. And then the full funding grant agreement update. So the documents, the environmental has been submitted to DOI, Vance, and also to the governor's office, separate, NEPA and HEPA. Correct. Okay.
Okay, and we have that also as an agenda item, so we can come back to that. So members, any questions on the executive director's update?
Oh, was that the update?
That was her update.
Okay, I guess I'll
Okay.
I have some comments maybe.
Mhm.
I think what I've noticed over the last year is we're kind of getting a little bit farther and farther distance from a mix between like your status and strategy of things, and then the fiduciary duty we have to kind of look at, cost, finance, schedule, performance, HR, and your updates are becoming very short. And so, for example, at the quarterly meeting, I kind of expected to hear like what happened and like what issues got brought up and like what actions do we have and those kinds of things. And I know we have committees to handle all of those things that report back, but I do miss the people, your staff being able to brief us on things, showing us pictures of things that are going on, actually reviewing cost and finance, schedule and performance every time. I think we really need to add that. I think we need to add reviewing cost, schedule, and performance. It's just what people do when they run $1 billion project, right?
You want that during my executive update
No,
instead
but
of
I
at the
would like
POC
it.
and finance?
I don't think I want it in your executive update, but I do notice that we're missing those pieces. So it's not the executive update that I'm kind of banging on so much. It's more we're not getting any other updates. We're not getting the updates from the staffers. You're getting things like, oh, we need money, or we have a problem with this, or here's a status on this thing.
POC, so you're not getting updates from the staff
No,
at the
what I'm
POC.
saying is the full board of directors, the POC chair will report on what happened, but there's probably topics that the full board of directors who didn't attend the POC should be seeing, or the people of Hawaii that only, dial into the board of directors meetings. And so I don't think that the committees fully, although they go into a lot of detail, there's probably some middle ground of the committee is going into a lot of detail, and then the board of directors, while you don't want the meeting to stretch on for forever, having some status on cost schedule performance. I just think that that's just gotta be there somehow. It doesn't have to be your section. It can just be a section where, but I do miss having at the board of directors meeting, having some of the staff, the senior staff come in and brief, topics that are relevant to the board of directors and taking the initiative to do that. I'm not sure we always know what we want to put on the agenda. We can start doing that and be more prescriptive about it. But I think that if we work together, maybe we can kind of come up with a happy medium between
Great, because
getting
chair dictates
just
the
getting
agenda.
right.
So we
So-
report on what she would like.
Right. My suggestion to the chair is that we kind of work together before and say, hey, what do you think of these topics? And then the chair can say, yeah, these sound good, because we might not always know. I guess the other thing is that from the committee chairs, for them to, instead of only just giving a status, saying, hey, maybe this topic should be brought up to the board of directors for a full briefing or a shortened version of the full briefing or something like that. Because I think that would be helpful. So the committee chairs have something on them, the chair has something on them, and Hart has something on them for us to kind of work together. Because I think these are just getting more cursory. You know what I'm saying, Colleen?
Yeah, I do. A matter of fact, that's something that I've wondered about as well, because when I was on the board, and this is the trade-off. When I was on the board the first time and we chaired it, we did not have subcommittees. So the subcommittees evolved, I think, if I'm not mistaken, probably around Toby's time. The trade-off was, because we didn't have the subcommittees, we had longer meetings. But we have long meetings anyway. But we had longer meetings and they were more detailed. And what I think, and I've had this discussion with Cindy, what I think caused a lot of this is because we used to have the committee meetings precede the board meeting. So it was kind of redundant. So one of the things I've been looking at, and at some time we will probably have that discussion, is whether or not we should get briefed on the whole board level as opposed to the subcommittee level, except for certain kinds of items. Today's thing was, I think Kika wasn't here for the POC meeting, right? So you kicked your agenda. So that's why his agenda, meaning all of the various votes that needs to be, is in
Sure.
here. Yes.
Let me clarify. I was here. There was a scheduling agenda issue that prevented us from having the meeting. That's why the meeting wasn't held and we pushed it. So yeah, just to clarify,
Okay.
I was available and I was here.
So that's why we have a lot of the things being voted on. But I think that the board, it's kind of found its legs. So maybe now it's time for us to, and we've utilized, I think, the pig system more. So I think maybe it's time for us to see whether we need all of that, but we would have to change the rules. So that's one of the things that as you know, I've been looking at in the rules is whether we should do that. But I understand what you're saying.
I think Lori needs more guidance of what we want during the board of directors meeting, because the only thing that she has control of is her update. All the
Yeah.
rest is sort of like, oh, we put it on. But if we don't put it on, we don't get it, right?
Yeah, but I don't dictate what she puts on.
No, not what she puts on,
Right.
but the other agenda items. So we don't have any other agenda items besides her, because
No, but that's not
nobody
true,
put anything
Michelle.
on, right?
We do have, that's the reason why, for example, the full funding grant agreement is
yeah.
a separate agenda
Right.
item. The city center relocation traffic impact
I
is a
know.
separate item.
I'm kind of harping on we don't look at the overall cost schedule and performance each time. That's kind of the big project one. Like, show me an overall schedule, show me where we are, show me how much money we have, and then it's easy to do that, right? And that's kind of like what we're all building. So that one, I think, in particular, I'm missing. I miss
Okay.
that one a lot.
So why don't you give Cindy a description of that, and then we'll put it on as agenda item. And
I think
we'll,
it's pretty easy to status that.
It is, but I guess I looked at it as that's between I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Kiko.
no,
what do you
so
want?
I mean, I think consistently, we've been trying to work towards that, and I think we've had it in the past. Not sure if, Michelle, you were on the committee at that time, or maybe that was when I was in the finance committee, but we've been working towards an updated, regular cash flow statement or some sort of um, snapshot of where we're at revenue wise, cost wise, project costs and whatnot. And I think Hart has been working on, and Rick and Lori have been working on, and Nate as well, putting that together. But it's kind of taking a bit of time. But I think that's what you're asking for is kind of a snapshot in time and update. And some of the things that I've been asking for is actuals versus projections, those types of numbers to see where we're at, how we're performing on an ongoing basis. So not sure if that's exactly what you're looking for, but I think as far as the POC committee is concerned, and also trying not to be too redundant with finance. There is some information that I know finance has the responsibility for, but then there's some shared responsibility between POC and finance that I think we're still trying to work out, and hopefully
Yeah,
going
I think
forward
at
that'll.
the directors meeting, I think it's more of an executive level as opposed to the more detailed level things that you're looking for. So
Right.
that everybody can just go, oh, are we red, yellow, green? Are we red, yellow, green? What's going on? Is this part bad? Is this part good? I mean, we all knew that the Middle Street part was delayed, and then we heard about the lawsuit. So then, some of that is, but if you had gotten reminded about that every month, then we knew it was delayed. We knew it was delayed, but we didn't get a real update on it because we knew it was delayed. But if it kind of showed like that every month, then it would have been a better reminder, I think.
It's also in the monthly report, Michelle. It's been there since
I'm
January.
saying like as a chart in the board of directors, not in a sub document or a committee. I just think at the executive senior strategic level, it's important to review those things because the board does empower the committees, but at the top level, the board is responsible, right? There's very little authority given to the committees. It's more review and making recommendations.
I think the one thing that we have asked is for both Kika and Robert to work together to try and prevent so that we wouldn't have a redundancy for the staff. But that may not be, Michelle, what you're looking for. That's more like I tell Robert all the time, you got to get the financial report to look like a check register. So we know exactly how much money we have, how much money is encumbered, how much money is going out. Like we've written the check, but it hasn't been cashed. That's I think something that they're working on. So, but I hear you loud and clear, and I think it is a matter because the one thing everybody has to realize is that the buck stops here.
Right. So I'll give you an example. Last meeting, we talked about the full funding grant agreement and a schedule that says what you need, when, so that we can get our money, so that we get it in time, so that we can get the RFP out, so that we can buy the next section. It's not on the agenda. Okay. I'm like, oh, I thought it was going to happen in the exec director's update meeting. She's going to tell me, and she's going to show me the schedule that we asked for it 3 times already. But I don't have it. So I didn't assume you had to put it on the agenda because it was already on the agenda. And maybe I'm just getting a hangry day because, it only ate
It
half
is
my
number
spam
12, and the schedule will be shared with you.
But-
Number 12.
But, under number 12.
Full
briefing,
funding grant agreement
Where
amendment
is it?
process.
Number 12.
Oh my God, I've only got the first page.
Right.
Is that going to be the actual schedule? And then I asked a staff member to call me and go over the schedule with me, and I said I'd be happy to review it, but then nobody called. And this is kind of like the 4th or 5th staff member that I've asked to call me about things, and I never get a call back. So I'm like,
Who are you calling, Michelle, that they're not calling you
Vance.
back? Okay.
Okay,
why did you
Vance.
not call me? I'm like, dudes, call me so I can go over this stuff with you because that's what I do. I do this. This is what I do as a Fed. So call me. Just call me and I'll go over it with you. I mean, what is going on? Is somebody telling them not to call us or something?
No, nobody's telling the staff not to call
Are
you,
they
but
tell-
really
what
the
is there- is
proper
there- is-
protocol is to go through Cindy, and Cindy comes through us to get
Right,
the
so I expected him
information.
to call Cindy and we get an appointment, right? But then, and I'll just be honest, I just expected a call, I expected earned value, I expected a call, I expected all of these things, and I know you guys are doing it, but we're not seeing it in even the committee meetings. So, okay, I'm done, thank you.
So this isn't lost. Tell Cindy what you want it to look like on the agenda. And Cindy, you
And I'll
tell,
coordinate with
right,
Kika, because it
right.
falls under, and Robert, because it kind of falls under both of their committees, and I wanna make sure that I coordinate. But it's gonna be very simple, it's like 3 charts, but it's something that like we can all look at, that's gonna be consistent, that's gonna like be able to tell us like how we're doing and where the problems are. We all deserve to get that kind of senior level status and not have to dig through giant reports to be able to see it.
I agree. My bone to pick with the staff was on
And my fault
SDG.
about the full funding grant agreement not being on the agenda, because I only ripped out the first page.
No, it is on the agenda. That's,
Yeah,
and I said it earlier because that was a problem, so we didn't. My thing was on SDG, and this is directed at Lori and Nate. I understand when we say a claim that there may be claims and whatever else, but that's very different than when we have a lawsuit filed or a lawsuit threatened. I don't remember anything saying within the past couple of months that we had a lawsuit threatened or that a lawsuit was going to be filed. I think that as a board, because ultimately it comes to us, we will authorize whether or not an attorney is hired, for example, whether the attorney gets paid. That's in the budget. So if something like this is going to happen, you've got to make it very clear. What I don't like is a sense that you guys are playing semantics with us. There is a difference between a lawsuit and a claim. We have a lot of claims. We have claims that are less than $1 million that don't come before us, claims more than $1 million that do come before us. So claims are different. And yes, we knew that. And I think it's also very interesting that on the SDG lawsuit, it seems the way it's been played to the press, and I don't know, Joey, if you fielding these questions or not, is that somehow it's related to HART. But if you look at the lawsuit, it's not necessarily HART. Well, it's maybe HART's compliance or complacency with HECO, but it's HECO again. So those are the things that should be very clear as to who the allegations are against and what. Because I remember when John Moore was still with us, and he was talking about HECO wanting these oversized vaults, and that caused all this problem on YY Loop. And he didn't feel that it was necessary. And at some point, we gotta push back. So I think that those are the important things that we as a board gotta know. And we don't get slapped by finding it in the media that all of a sudden we've gotten sued. Not by any small amount either. A huge amount of money.
Chair, I did send you in an email the detailed schedule of when we found out about the lawsuit. They've been threatening for years to submit a lawsuit, so we didn't know exactly when they were going to do it. We've been trying to negotiate with them for 2 years. So we kind of did find out at the same time as you that we
I
found
thought
out
you guys knew about a week before us.
informally. Their attorney contacted our outside attorney and said they might file the day before grand opening. And then they called Nate and I in a urgent, can you guys talk to us on this day, which was, I believe it was on July 5th. And Nate and I quickly got on a call that day with them, and they said, if you don't budge from the 91 million, we're gonna file. We said, I can't justify that number to the board. I clearly said that to them. There's no way I can do that. And so then they decided to file right after that. And we found out, just like you folks in the media, and then unfortunately they put out a press release that was not very accurate.
And Laurie, you know this. One of the things, I see Paula Uki back there, one of the things that we've been concerned about is who is in control when it gets to the litigation stage, or pretty much litigation stage. And that was why we asked CORE to step in. With all due respect to you and to Rick, you guys are not lawyers. So terms of art may not mean the same thing to you. So we expect to be, the reason why we've asked for CORE to be a more active is because we have these huge litigation issues out there, especially like Howard Hughes. So we want to know what's going on, because the bottom line is it's our decision. And unless we're kept apprised on the state and how the status of it as it goes on, we're going to be caught going, what? When? Yeah, we know they had a claim. We know it has to do with, the delays caused primarily by HECO and what HECO wanted to do. And, so these are things that we need to know. And that's why we asked for the added protection of having CORE monitor these cases as well.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We don't make a move without CORE and
No,
outside
but they were
counsel.
supposed to tell us, the board, which they haven't, by the way, out of all due respect. So that's the other thing, because we make the final decision. That's something that I think Hart's administration hasn't understood yet. The board makes the decisions, the board is responsible, and it's the board that controls the purse strings. Okay, so with that, anything else, members? Yes, Kika?
I just want to make a final comment. I appreciate, Michelle, you bringing up some of your concerns. And I just want to say from my point of view, for the POC committee, and I think even when I was chair of the finance committee, and I hope some members can attest to it, if anybody has any issues that they want to add to the agenda, I welcome it. Send me an email, tell me specifically what you want, and I have no problem putting it on the agenda. But with that said, I try, for myself, speaking for myself, I try to follow what is already in our rules and procedures for what responsibilities fall under committees, and I try to stay as close to that as possible. With some of these bigger issues like the FFGA and maybe STG, it is in our rules to elevate such issues if it's something that maybe is better taken up at the board level as versus the committee level. So there maybe are reasons why FFGA isn't on the committee level, because it reaches a level that maybe should be discussed fully in the board. So I just wanted to make that clear, and I am very sensitive to some of the information that you're looking for. So, please let me know if there's anything that you want to add to the
I
agenda.
don't think it's ever been a problem asking for something to be on the agenda. I'm looking for something a little bit more collaborative, because we can't possibly know what should be on every agenda. I think maybe if we were attending some of the lower level meetings, then we probably would be much better at proposing something to the PLC. Like if I was at some of the meetings with FGA and everything, FTA, sorry. But we're not at attendance in those. And so I think I'm looking for a more collaborative process where some of the staff might propose some agenda items that might not even be of huge impact, but are of public importance. Things like, we'll have, I don't know, like the art things, and we used to have the kids come in and we'd see them and everything, and I don't remember seeing them for a while. So some of those more public interest things, I think maybe we can be collaborative about, because we might not know that those are really ongoing and where they are in terms of finishing, and I think they are public interest items. And I don't want to clog up the agenda, but I do want it to be a little bit more collaborative, and I would love to see the staff briefing, some fun things too, and some public interest things, or those kinds of things, as well as something that they think is really important that might be coming up that might not have really crossed the threshold yet, but might cross the threshold next time. So I think that's kind of, Lori, what I'm looking for, is like maybe a little bit more collaboration in the agenda items, especially for things that we might not know everything about. And the art thing is kind of an example. So, okay, thanks.
Any other discussion, members? Question, comments?
I just want to make
Yes.
a quick observation, which is, Chair, that if you look at the media coverage in recent months, one of the things that has been repeatedly highlighted is the fact that we are perceived as being more transparent now. And specifically, people are saying, for example, when Laurie has bad news, it gets out there. And I would argue that apart from being the right thing to do, makes us more accessible to the public and is better for us. And so, the more information, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
I wasn't gonna mention this, but since you brought up the media, I'm following up on it. I received a call from a person who's been following in the media, who's been following the rail and Hart for a very long time. And matter of fact, he hasn't been nice to us in a lot of occasions, but he called to tell me that he wanted to congratulate this board because he said of all the boards that I've watched that has been in control of Hart, he says this is by far the best board. He says this board asks the hard questions. It makes our life easier because they're anticipating the questions and they're asking those questions and they're not letting the staff get away. So it's not going unnoticed, exactly what you're saying, and that's probably affecting the public sentiment as well. So among one of our critics, and believe me, he is a critic, he wanted me to express to the board in his opinion, what a good job this board does do, because though we had this interchange between Michelle, Kika, and Robert, and everyone, that's exactly what they want to hear, and they want to know that we're not rubber stamping. And just so everybody remembers, a rubber stamp board was what we had pre the 2016 charter amendment that took effect July 1, 2017. So I think that's something that people do remember. Those who've covered us forever do remember what it was like before. So you're absolutely.
No, I mean, like, really, we're all together, all of us are one team. And yeah, you might get beat up a little bit, but like, I mean, that's just, we get beat up too. That's just the game, I guess, here, especially at this point in the project where there's so much you cannot change. And you coulda, shoulda, woulda, but you can't do that. We can just dig in and like stay on cost, schedule, and performance, and do the right thing, like Lori does. When it's bad news, you say it's bad news, and you just try to figure out how to move forward from it, And I think we have to be very careful about our relationship because we don't want that to, between ourselves and Hart, we don't want that to be impacted. We recognize we play different roles, but we don't want to impact that.
But we do play different roles.
We play different roles.
And we are the oversight. And, and that's what we are here to do. And that's something that we are going to continue to do as a board. So any other questions or comments by anyone? If not, let's move on to agenda item number 3. Anyone here in the public wishing to testify on agenda item number 3, which is interviews for and selection of 9th voting board member? Anyone in the audience? I don't see any hands. Cindy? No one? I don't know whether if I were the 3 of you, I'd be insulted or what. Somebody should say something. And be like me and have David Shapiro write about me when I don't do anything. Anyway. We'll begin this process. As you know, we had a pig. The pig interviewed actually 4 individuals who expressed an interest. We originally had 5, I believe, and 1 dropped out. So with that, the pig then narrowed it down to the 3. Is there a member of the pig who would like to say anything about this? I think we do have we had a report the last time and then we scheduled this. Is there anybody on the pig who would like to say anything? No? Then okay, let's begin. So members, we are going to have the 3 individuals come up individually, be interviewed. And then after that, I guess we will probably go into executive session to discuss any questions you may have on this matter. But let's begin with our own member, Mark Holland. You can stay there or you can move up, whichever way you want to do it.
This is fine.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so I reapplied. I was originally appointed to fulfill a term that someone had left, and I would like to continue with the pot mission. and have a full term as a board member. I feel that my past in transportation in many different ways, MBTA, here in Hawaii as the ITEM coordinator, building the trails in East Range, North Range, Makua, Drum Road. I've been in transportation for a long time. I did the Easy Toll system in New Jersey all the way to London, where the fiber optic cable goes underseas under the Atlantic. I've been the permit coordinator for HOT. I was the HOT representative to the 24 state and county agencies that form the Environmental Stormwater Board. And here at HOT, I also sat on the Sustainability Committee. I was the GEC for the MBTA for rail extensions. And I feel that the background I have and the knowledge I have blends to this board. I feel like I sometimes know the right questions to ask. I know there were policy mistakes in the past that some of them I help avoid when I was here, such as we're going to dispose of all the contaminated soil in children's playgrounds. So I like to continue the mission. I don't like stopping something when it's not completed. And the mission of HOT is not completed yet until we get at least out of the water. And as Anthony says, we'll sleep.
Thank you, Mark. I believe the more efficient way is if anybody has any questions, why don't we take it at the end of each person's testimony? So are there any questions of Mark or Cindy, is there another way we should do this? Should we have them all testify and then ask questions of them at the end?
I think it would be more efficient to do one at a time.
Yeah, that's what I think. So members, any questions that you have of Mark Howland? No, I guess we know you well, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next person is another one of our members, Joe O'Donnell.
Thank you, Chair. So you have all had my opportunity to review my resume. As you know, I'm a construction person from bottom up with over 50 years experience in structural steel. Couple of highlights was in my career was first iron worker and assembled the Aloha Stadium. The first iron worker and did all of the assembly of Mauna Kea telescopes and a few other projects. I have been involved in rail since the late 1990s when the first rail was proposed. Unfortunately, we lost that by one vote by the city council. We spent a lot of money and a lot of time pushing for that rail, demonstrating and getting people out to support it. But we lost over there, and now we have this rail, which I am honored to be a part of the board, and I'd like to become that ninth voting member. I know there has been some concern because of the fact that I am a member of the Contractors Licensing Board, and sometimes the schedule bangs, and I'm not able to attend the HART meetings. But I will make this commitment because we are now back to full quorum for the Contractors Licensing Board. I will definitely make it a priority that I will attend all meetings. There may be a couple of meetings that I may have to go to the mainland on mandatory training, fiduciary responsibilities as a trustee on the Ironworkers Trust Fund. But other than that, I will be here. I'll be happy to clarify anything else or any questions for me.
Thank you. Natalie, I don't want to ignore you, but if you have anything to say, can you yell out? Because you're kind of not in my peripheral vision at all. So if you have any questions or comments, please just say, hey, I'm here. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you.
Okay, Members, any questions of Mr. O'Donnell? Any questions? None? Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay. Last but not least, Edwin Young. Members, I'll make full disclosure. Edwin Young, Wes Suchita, and I did the infamous audit of the auditor. So that's my personal experience with Edwin Young. And my other experience with Edwin Young is if you ever wanted to know why we have that resolution or that rule that says executive director shall not speak, or anyone shall not speak for this board without board approval, it is because of Edwin Young. Edwin Young did the first audit of HART, and I know because it was my resolution. When Mr. Grabowskis had his own press conference, and it drove us absolutely bonkers on the board. But anyway, that's my disclosure.
I have a disclosure.
Yes.
I also know Edwin from my days at OTS from when he audited Handy Van a few times. And just to put it on table, I've known him for, in that role too.
Robert, I see your
My
green light
disclosure
on.
as well. My disclosure is I have worked with Edwin when in my capacity as Chief Financial Officer for HART, back in 2017, and I also worked with Edwin at OTS when he audits the bus and handy van.
Anyone else before Mr. Young begins?
Sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's all yours.
Waste management. Well, congratulations, all of you, on your first accomplishment. I rode the SkyTrain and thoroughly enjoyed both the view and the ride. And when I told my wife it is similar to what they have in the San Francisco Bay Area, the BART system, she said, "Oh, well," and then she left and went back to San Francisco. Thank you for allowing me to interview today and to present my views on Skyline. As most of you know, as city auditor, we worked under the philosophy that there should be no surprises. So we would usually brief people from the bottom all the way up to the top before we briefed the managing director who had the final say-so on our audit results. And based on what I'm seeing here, transparency is very important to you. Media coverage and how to deal with media is important. And also working with the public and accomplishing your goals are also very important. For those of you who don't know me, I've lived abroad in Europe and Asia, and in many cities, including Washington, D.C., San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And everywhere I went, I watched the development of the rail system and its impact on the different cities. In Singapore, for example, it was a backwater country. It was basically underdeveloped. And we watched the rail system when they broke ground. They even uprooted my father-in-law's grave and took over that area on the far end of the island. Changi Airport was basically a fishing village, farmland, and nobody wanted to live there. Now Changi Airport is a model for the rest of the world for how airports should be built. And the housing development around Changi Airport is the most desirable of anywhere else on the island nation. As I have observed the rail systems in Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Los Angeles, and elsewhere, your problems and your history is no different than any one of what many of these cities and countries ran into. For example, Washington, D.C., the Tyson to Dulles International Airport, 4 years late, over budget. So congratulations, you were able to complete it in a reasonable period of time, and don't feel embarrassed about what transpired. But I think the board needs to start looking at is the economic impact of the rail system when it is completed and what it's going to do to Honolulu. If history repeats itself, rural people in the rural areas will have easier access to the city core. City residents like myself will not be opposed to living in the rural outer areas of the city. And the Honolulu metropolitan area will expand, and your tax base and economic base will expand. So the question then becomes, what should HART do? Is it a temporary organization as a government, quasi-governmental entity? Should it plan on its obituary, or should it be looking forward to what needs to be done for the future? It can be reactive or it can be proactive. Growth is going to occur whether you want it or not. Whether you control it or whether you react to it are things that the board will have to decide. The difference between being reactive and proactive is the Washington, D.C. metro area. When I was first in Washington, you only went to Alexandria, across the river, and that was it. Now the rail system is expanded out to Loudoun, Ashburn, and many other areas of the Northern Virginia complex. Channel Example opened up areas of England, like London and Kent, that were never available to anyone but farmers. So I think the board needs to start looking at, what are we going to do? What are our long-range plans, our short-range plans? What is our strategy for implementing the plans? And basically, as the city develops, are you going to react or are you going to be proactive to it? If you have a limited budget, do you follow the less expensive route of developing into isolated areas and then letting affordable housing and commercial development occur around the stations? Or do you service high density residential areas like Mo'ili, Ili, and Kahala, and Hawaii Kai, which is the most expensive route to choose because you're going through very valuable real estate to service a very select crowd? These are policies and the decisions that I think the future board needs to look at. There were problems in the past, but then rather than dwelling on that, the board needs to start focusing on the future. What are we going to do? What our policies are going to be? And basically, as you anticipate growth, you continue to expand the system. The question is, how are you going to fund it? Is someone working on further funding for the expansion, say to the university or to other parts of Honolulu? And how do you service it? How do you develop it? Should you control the areas around the train stations so that you generate additional revenues for the capital funding, as well as the operations and maintenance of the system, which DTS will need? These are questions that I think the board will have to start addressing. These are hard questions. They're not easy to answer. And as Colleen has indicated, we always ask the hard questions and the unanswered questions. And so with that, I'd like to quote an old man, who a very wise person in my college years, who said, "Son, go out and experience the world, learn all that you can, and come back to Hawaii and bring that knowledge back to you." So after I retired as a city auditor for Honolulu, I'm here to get back to Hawaii, what I've learned.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions of Edwin Young?
I have one.
Sure.
So before I ask the question, though, I do want to say that my not asking questions of the other two candidates isn't that I don't have any questions. It's just that I had an opportunity in the permitted interactive group to ask those questions, and those were addressed. So I didn't feel that I had the need to ask them again here in this body. But with that said, Mr. Young, you mentioned the board's being proactive in planning, and I'm paraphrasing, and correct me if I'm misstating what you're intending to say, but being proactive in planning or developing policy to be proactive in the future of rail, whether it's past Kaka'ako to Ala Moana and completing the full line as the city council approved it, or if it's going beyond Ala Moana to other areas like UH or West Oahu. So my question is, do you believe that it's the board's responsibility to act in such a proactive way to be proactive and go out and look for funding if the funding's not there, and to direct and develop the project, or is it merely to manage the construction of the project? And if so, whatever your answer is, what are some suggestions that you propose? Because and the reason I'm asking these questions is sometimes I'm confused as to what our role is, because I'm hearing from outside sources that here's what we're doing, here's where we're going, here's where we're stopping, and I'm kind of confused because it's news to me. So what is your input on that?
Thank you for the question. It's going to be a push-pull. It's going to be a demand, and it's going to be a reaction. For example, when Washington first built the metro system, it was only supposed to service the Reagan Airport and the District of Columbia. Tyson's Corner said, we want a rail system. Bethesda said, we want the rail system. We're tired of commuting 1.5 to 2 hours into the district. It's inconvenient. Can you push the rail system? Neighborhood boards were influential, and because it's a federal government center, there are many lobby groups and politicians as well in Congress pushing to expand the rail system into Rockville, and now it's up to West Virginia. It's expanding the airport out to Dulles. Reagan was supposed to close. It never did because it's so convenient. But at the same time, Dulles developed as a major international transportation center for the entire world. So they couldn't close it, but then they needed mass transportation to bring people up to quickly from the district to meet their flights. They had Washington Flyer. It took you 1 to 2 hours to get from the district into the airport. With a rail system, you can now do it in about 55 minutes.
Yeah, okay, so maybe, sorry, I'm looking more towards, so our authority is given to us in the charter, right? And I'm asking if you believe that our role is merely to manage the construction or to manage the development, and whether or not you believe that our role is to complete the rail beyond Kakaako to Ala Moana as the city council approved.
Your mandate at this present time is to complete the rail system to Ala Moana, and as the mayor has indicated, he wants it to reach there. But the population, once they start riding the rail, will say, can you extend it to the rest of Waianae? Can you extend it to Wailua, Haleiwa?
So is it our role and responsibility to seek additional funding if our responsibility is to complete it to Ala Moana if that funding doesn't currently exist?
I think you need to develop contingency plans, because when the demand comes in, you have two choices. One, to scramble for funding as it did with the original plan, and everything went haphazardly developed, and they hired consultants before they were needed. They hired engineers and construction firms before they were needed. Or to say, this is where we plan to extend to University of Hawaii, and also to further on to Ko'olina, and maybe even further than that. Let me go back and go back to the San Francisco Bay Area. San Francisco only wanted a BART to run from San Francisco to Oakland. Marin County opted out, San Jose opted out, Palo Alto opted out. They said, we don't want to pay for it, we want nothing to do with it. Now you have the BART system extending out to Livermore, out to Antioch, and even beyond that point, because the demand for the rail system is so great. And you either have traffic jams running into the city, or you have a rail system transporting mass quantities of people in to work in the city center. That's going to happen, in my opinion, that's going to happen in Honolulu. Are you prepared for it? If the mandate changes to say, look, you can't go out of business, you're quasi-governmental. Your original mandate was to complete it to Ala Moana, but now we've got this push and demand to extend it beyond that. And then suddenly you're caught in a breach. Do we react to it, or do we have plans to pull out the plans and say, we have plans for the University of Hawaii, here's how we're going to do it. Then, if that mandate comes through, you will then have the problem of finding funding for it. Have you anticipated or explored the other options for funding? For example, many cities have bought the areas around the train stations. They've controlled development of it. As housing erupted and commercial development grew, it became neighborhood centers, as mini town centers for these areas, even in the remote areas. For example, in Haleiwa, if you have built a rail station out there, housing will occur out there and commercial development will occur there. Are you going to forego the revenues that could be generated from it? Or are you going to own the property and start leasing and renting out that property so that it provides additional capital for you to use?
So as a board member, with our current authority given to us by the charter, what kind of policies would you recommend to accomplish what you just said?
I think
And is it our responsibility?
Currently it isn't, but I foresee if what I've seen in other countries.
Who gives us that responsibility?
The council can do it, the electorate can do it, you can do a charter amendment. You don't have an end date for the existence of as a quasi-governmental entity.
So your understanding of our mandate as it currently sits is that the rail, our mandate is to construct the rail to Ala Moana.
Correct. And then after that, the demand will be so great that you cannot go out of existence. You will still be here 10 years from now.
And if the fund, and is it your understanding that if the funding doesn't exist to go to Ala Moana, that it's our responsibility to help find that funding?
It's going to be a joint responsibility, but you should have contingency plans in existence so that if you have plan A, plan B, or plan C, you can go to those plans to find the funding that's needed.
Okay, but I mean, you're saying that we should be proactive. I mean, when you say it's a joint, I mean, is it our role to help find and then seek, collaboration or agreement, or is it our role to just follow?
Kika, I'm going to interrupt you here
Yeah.
because I think depending on where you're going, are you saying that Anthony's Pig, which we created as a board, is something that is outside or ultra-virus? Because Anthony's Pig is called Ala Moana and Beyond. And we as a board adopted it. The majority of it, I thought it was unanimous. We adopted it. So we have taken the position, and the charter says part of the responsibilities of this board is to develop.
No, Chair, I mean, and I'm just trying to understand because I have always supported going to Ala Moana. And
I understand that.
so
But
I'm
my concern is, are you, by the questioning, are you saying that, I mean, whatever Edwin believes, Edwin will say, he has no problems answering questions. My concern is, are you implying that we as a board, when we did Ala Moana and Beyond, and it is and beyond, that somehow we're acting ultra-virus? Because I don't think so, because I would never have put a pig together that acts outside the scope of the board.
No, I don't think that's what I'm implying. I'm just trying to understand. I mean, I think board members' opinions that serve on the board, personally, I'd like to understand where they sit as far as, their view on where the rail should end. And I mean, I'm just going off of comments that were made about being proactive and about, I just want to understand just, where the perspective.
I just want to be sure that eventually where you're not getting is basically at the creation of the pig, which we have done as a board.
I think we're in full agreement as
Okay.
far as the pig is concerned. I'm just trying to understand. I mean, I forgive me, but I thought this was an opportunity to get to know. I've never met Edwin before, like some of the board members here. I haven't known him for years. This is the first time I've ever met you. And you've made some comments about being proactive. I just want to understand to what extent you believe the board can be proactive in our role and responsibilities. That's all I'm trying to understand.
Those are good questions, and
Yeah.
I fully appreciate where you're coming from. If I am a board member, I think the board has to change its focus from the past and the problems you ran into to shift it to the future. What's coming down the road? How are we going to address the problems? For example, if you're constructing a house or a building, you're going to anticipate electrical problems, plumbing problems, and wiring problems, and all kinds of concrete problems. If the concrete is substandard, the building's going to collapse. So you want to make sure that your contingencies are in place to ensure that the building is safe.
Thank you, Chairman.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I
No,
just
that's
got a
okay.
little nervous because it sounded to me like you're questioning the pig that we had created and whether we were acting ultra virus.
No,
That's
not at
my
all.
concern. Okay, thank you.
No.
Any other member have any questions of Edwin? Natalie, I don't want to forget you. Any questions? He's up your alley because you know his background is in audits, as you know. So
Yeah, Chair, just no questions, but at the end, I would like to just make some comments.
go ahead.
Is now the appropriate time because I wanted to make comments on a couple of the candidates.
Oh, okay. Well, why don't we wait? Because we would have to. We'll see if the board's gonna want to go into executive session, and then after that, you can do it in the discussion section when we have to come back and do a vote, right?
Yes,
No,
thank
she's
you.
not going to take. But when we come back and there's a motion because we do have to take a vote and we'll have discussion. And at that time, because you're going to talk about all three of them, you can do it then. That may be a more appropriate time. But if you want to make your comments now, you can make your comments now. It's
No,
up to
I'll
you.
wait. Thank you, Chair. I'll
Thank you.
wait.
Anyone else? If not, thank you very much, Edwin. Members, we have on the agenda an executive session. Is the board inclined to enter into executive session pursuant to Hawaii Vice Statute 92-4 and subsection 92-5A2 to consider the hire, evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of an officer or an employee or in charges brought against the officer or employee where consideration of matters affecting privacy will be involved in section 92-5A4 to consult with its attorneys on questions and issues of matters pertaining to the board's powers, duty, privileges, immunities, and liabilities. And this is a reminder to all board members that when we go into executive session under the new changes to the Sunshine Law, when we return, we must summarize what the discussions were. And of course, we do not vote in executive session. The only exception was when the pig was meeting because they had to whittle it down to 3.
Chair, I move
You
for the executive session.
There's a motion and a second. Any more discussion on moving into executive session? If not, we'll have unanimous consent. Members, we will move into executive session. Are we going into that
Oh,
room? We're
Chair?
going into that room. Thank you.
Chair?
Yes.
Chair, just a comment, and this would apply to any executive sessions today. I understand I will not be participating because I haven't signed the confidentiality agreement, and that is due to a disagreement between the Corporation Counsel and the State Attorney General's office.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And yes, yes. No, we would like the applicants to recuse themselves from this, from coming in. Yes. So Mark and Joe will not also be in attendance. Thank you, members. Let's go into executive session. Sunshine Law. Shall I give the summary now and then? Okay. So I'm going to give a summary that's required of what went on in executive session. Then after that, I'm going to ask for comments from everyone, including Natalie, one more time, and also from the public if they have anything else to say. And then at that time, we will entertain the desire of the board, a motion or whatever. So with that, so is there any further discussion, not discussion necessarily, but comments from the public on agenda number 3? And at this time, I'd like to ask Natalie to say what she was going to say earlier. Let me check first. No members from the public? Nothing on, okay. Natalie, would you like to make your comments that you were going to make earlier, please?
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to mention that, we already have financial expertise on the board. Robert was a CFO and I'm a CPA. And so with all due respect to Edwin Young, whom I do respect greatly, I think that is a little bit duplicative. And I wanted to mention that I think Mark's experience with prior working with Hart, as well as his current experience would be a continued asset for the board. With respect to Joe, Joe, I respect you as well. Just wanted to say that there's been some, I don't know what the quite the right word, but when state appointees get put on as voting members, there's a little bit of concern about that at the state level. So those are my comments, Chair. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Natalie. We have no one else who wants to make any comments at this time. So members, I will entertain a motion. I gave my summary, right? Did I give my summary? Okay, just want to be sure I gave my summary. Okay, so, well, anyway, just to repeat it, the summary is that when we went into executive session, the members expressed their opinions on the various candidates that we have before us. That's sufficient, right? That's sufficient. Okay, with that, members, do we have a motion? Any motion? Yes, Roger.
I move Edwin Young be considered or by the board for member of this board.
Okay, we've been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Not? Do we have unanimous consent, members? We have unanimous consent. So welcome Edwin Young, and thank you very much to Joe and for Mark for putting in your application. And Mark, I would like to say that it has been an honor and a pleasure to serve with you for these years, and really enjoyed and appreciated your comments that you provided for us. And we do hope that you will continue to provide us your insight, as well as share with us any concerns that you may have as to how this board is progressing. And you can, email us, you can do whatever you want, but we will always be receptive to your comments. Any other? Yes.
Sort of comment on that same thing. I'd like to sort of mirror the comments that the chair made. The choice, I think, in the room was discussion went a lot of different ways, and I know that your background in environmental was a key thing, and I do want to thank you for your service too for this last period that you've been here too.
Any other comments, members? If not, members, what we will now do is we will take a recess. And the purpose of the recess is to get Edwin Young basically sworn in into this position of the 9th voting member. So with that, and having no objection, members, I'm going to call a short recess for that purpose. And when we reconvene, it will be with Edwin Young as the 9th voting member. Thank you very much, members. Short recess. And Joe, you continue to stay. Thank you very much, and thank you, and welcome back to the Board of Directors meeting. I would like to, at this time, after agenda item number 3, welcome Edwin Young as our 9th voting member. He's already taken his seat. He don't have a placard yet, but that's okay. Next meeting, we'll get you a placard, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So the next item is item number 4, which is the Board of Directors leadership elections. Is there anyone here in the audience who'd like to speak to this issue or this agenda item? Do we have anyone in the public? Cindy? None. So members, as you know, July 1st is when technically our terms end. So Kika is the vice chair and I am the chair. So we are going to have to elect the chair and the vice chair of the Board of Heart for the upcoming 2024 fiscal year, beginning July 1, 2023, ending June 30th, 2024, or soon thereafter. So members, first of all, we have no comments from the public. So do we have a motion or a discussion? What's your druthers,
Chair.
members? Yes.
I motion to nominate yourself as continuing on as chair of the Heart Board.
I will second that wholeheartedly.
You're my friend. You're both my friends. Okay, we have a motion on for, and a second, that I continue as the chair. Any discussion, members? No discussion?
Just moves, I just get.
We're done. Michelle says we're done. Okay, then we have unanimous consent. Thank you, I think, members. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your hard work.
Right. Thank you, Chair, for agreeing to continue.
I thought you were my friend, Anthony and Kika. Thank you very much. Okay, we still have now the open is the motion for vice chair.
Chair, I'd like to nominate Kika.
And a second. Kika, why is your thing on? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that Kika continue as vice chair of Heart Board of Directors. Any discussion, members? If not, then do we have unanimous consent? We have unanimous consent, so Kika, misery loves company. So thank you very much for continuing to serve.
For each other, you're not always in agreement. That's a good thing. Because it's collegial discussion. And I think that we don't always agree, and I think you provide perspective to the other board members, you know, when we have those discussions. So I appreciate that, you know, we relish in our differences in this board.
I think that's true. And if not, we also, you know, our differences, I think, really strengthen us versus divide us. And the most important thing is we're able to put it aside and move forward. So most of the decisions of this board has actually been by unanimous consent. And I thank the board for the support for this project and the fact that we will continue on. Do you have any words, Kika?
No, I just want to echo what what Michelle said, and you know, I appreciate that. I mean, I think we agree more than we don't, but even our disagreements, I think, are respectful and you know, in our own respects, I would say, you know, not unwarranted, but we always are respectful, and I appreciate that, and yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to continue to serve.
Thank you. Yes.
I thank you. I'd like to express my thanks to Kika as well, and draw the public's attention to the fact that being on this board requires hours and hours every month of volunteer unpaid activity, and even more so for the officers, for you and for Kika. And I think that perhaps often goes unrecognized, but I see it. I know the members of the board do. And so I thank you, Kika, as well, for all the hard work you do.
You know, Anthony, I think that from my perspective, this board is probably the hardest working board that I've ever served with. And I think this project it's a weird way of putting it, but has right-sized itself because of the work of the board and, of course, the Heart staff who supported us. But it's been an honor and a privilege to serve with everyone. So thank you very much, I think. Any other comments? If not, let's move to agenda item number 5, which is resolution 2023-8, approving the settlement of Eli Y. Yoshikawa versus Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation, civil number 1CV-22-000215. First of all, any member of the public willing or wishing to testify on this particular agenda item? Cindy is nodding no, so I assume there's nobody else online or anything along those lines. So Members, do you wish to go into executive session on this resolution? Or, because I don't believe we went to POC on this, did we? No. So would we have testimony first from Hart on this particular resolution?
Good morning, Chair,
Good
Vice
morning.
Chair, Board, Nate Mendes, Park Project Director. We have our outside counsel here, online, and maybe I'd like to defer, James, I can give a general overview of what the incident was, but I'd like to defer to you on exactly what you think is privilege and what I should share publicly rather than executive session, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sure thing.
Okay, so we're talking to who? Is it James Shin? Okay, James, I guess you're in the red, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Chair,
sorry, I'm just wanting to be sure.
So James, if okay, I'll just provide a high level overview of the incident and then you can maybe go into details of the case or we go to executive session from there.
That'd be perfect.
Okay, essentially this case, there was a motorcycle rider that was riding through the Nan work zone on CCUR 1. It happened right outside of HPU campus on Nimitz, and I believe going Diamond Head, so eastbound. The motorcycle rider rode over one of those steel construction plates that cover open trenches, hit their brakes, fell, totaled their motorcycle, and I believe broke their clavicle. And so we went to arbitration or mediation. One of the two, James can clarify that. And then this settlement was a result of that. I think it was confirmed that the steel plates had the adequate anti-slip material on them. And so I think there was a favorable ruling on the Hart side, but that is what provoked this settlement. James, I'll welcome any additions from you.
That's correct. The arbitrator was actually Chuck Crumpton, and he found in favor of Hart at the arbitration hearing.
We can't hear you. Can you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Try it again.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
This is negotiated. We haven't gone to, I'm sorry, this is Michelle Brungraber. You have not gone to any appeal. This is not the appeal.
And done in court.
Right. So this is an agreement before you have to go to court.
Yes, well, actually, when the CAP arbitrator renders an award, if either side does not appeal, then it gets converted into a judgment. However, before it was converted into a judgment, the plaintiff appealed the award and requested a trial de novo, and trial had been scheduled by the judge in the case to 2024. But in the interim, after the award was filed, and at or around the time it was for the plaintiff to appeal, the parties just discussed settlement. And as a result of those negotiations, we reached the final number that's been provided.
Okay. Is there any other example where that's similar to this, where somebody alleged that there was Hart negligence, that we were found not to be negligent, and that we had a settlement? Are there other examples of this during construction of the Hart rail?
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, there was no prior similar incidents as this particular motorcycle accident, so I could not speak as to that issue.
The joint tortfeasor, he just doesn't collect. Yes.
Quick question. Don't know whether you can answer that. How do we bifurcate this liability between Hart and Nan, the contractor? Because they're the one who lay out the metal plates and stuff, right?
I would suggest an executive session if you want to get into that.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I had a similar question as that. So members, any other questions that they might be able to answer? Just so that I'm clear, the settlement is $150,000.
That's correct, Chair.
That's in the
That's correct.
resolution. What's not in the resolution, and whether you can tell us or not, I assume, James, that you are an insurance defense attorney. So is there an insurance policy at issue here? Or is that something you want to take care of in executive session?
Yeah. All I can say is that this is under the RAP policy. And Old Republic is the insurance company. However, as far as allocation for payments of that, I think that's better for executive session.
All right. Members, any other questions? If not, I believe that I would like to entertain a motion.
Chair, I'd like to
Yeah.
make a motion that we move into executive session.
Okay, the motion is that pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute Section 92-4 and subsection 92-5A4, we are going to, in executive session, to consult with our attorneys on questions and issues of matters pertaining to the board's powers, duty, privileges, immunities, and liabilities. That's your motion?
I'll
Second?
second, Chair.
And a second. Any further discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent? We do, so we will be going into executive session. It's my understanding that everybody else who is not relevant to this executive session must leave because we need our quote unquote, our video with James Shin. That also means you, Natalie, sorry, that you have to leave as well. Thank you, members, and thank you, members of the public. We're back in the Board of Directors meeting of HART. We are continuing with agenda item number 5, which is the resolution 2023-8, approving the settlement of Eli Y. Yoshikawa versus HART, civil number 1CVV-22-000215. We are returning from executive session pursuant to the new Sunshine Law. In executive session, the board received advice from the respective attorneys on this matter and also on the issue, because it was a cap arbitration, issues that could not be discussed in public because the matter is sealed. So with that, Mr. Buck, is that okay for explanation? So with that, members, first of all, is there anyone else who may wish to now testify on item number 5 on the agenda? Hearing none, let us proceed. Members, we are looking for a motion on this resolution. Unless you have any further discussion that you would have, we can do the motion, a second, and then have our discussion at that time.
I'd like to move to approve the resolution.
Is there a second? It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Yes, Anthony.
Chair, I'm going to vote for this resolution, but in doing so, I'm doing it with gritted teeth because it's my personal assessment that the plaintiff here had the burden of responsibility for what happened. I think this is a case where HART is perceived as an organization with limitless amounts of money, and so why not let's just sue them. And it turns out that if we were to pursue this further in court, it would likely cost us much more than this settlement sum. So that's why I'm going to vote for it. But I do it, as I say, through gritted teeth.
Any other discussion, members? If not, do we have unanimous consent on this resolution among the members here? We do. Thank you very much. Members, we are now moving to let me ask Cindy something. Do you want to recess, Cindy? And feed them? To feed them. Oh, okay.
If the board is so.
Right. Okay, Next is agenda item number 6, status report in City and County of Honolulu, acting by and through Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation versus Victoria Ward Limited et al., civil number 18-1-1564-10 JMT. Members, I believe this is to update us on the Supreme Court argument which was held on this matter. Is that what this is for? This is what this is for, Paul?
Yes.
As you may or may not be aware, there was a Supreme Court argument held on this particular case. As you may recall, summary judgment was granted by Judge Tonaki, if I remember correctly, who is overseeing this particular case. And it went to the Hawaii Supreme Court, an argument was held, and we were going to get an update from our attorneys on this matter. So members, if anyone doesn't have any particular discussion on this or wants to hear from Hart on this, we can go into executive session unless you want some kind of preliminary briefing by the attorneys. Maybe for the public's sake, we can have some preliminary.
Can they say what they can say?
No, they can say whatever was said in court because that's all public. Right, for the public's sake. So with that, Paul, who wants to speak to this just generically before we go into executive session? No? That's fine. Right? And I know Rick is on as well. So Rick, we are trying to get at least some sort of discussion not covered by attorney-client, which we can share with the public as to what's going on in this case. So with that, Terry, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think we lost the vice chair members of the art board. We're on the record right now. I thought it might be helpful for the public and perhaps for some of the board members who don't know some of the history here to just do a nutshell
Right.
of what this is about and then give you a briefing. Would that be okay?
That's fine.
The
Thank you.
Supreme Court argument, which was a very significant event in the case occurred 3 weeks ago, and I'll come back to that. Rick Rail, who's dialed in with us, is our co-counsel. So I'm Terry O'Toole from Starlin Toole, Marcus and Fisher here. Rick is with the Nossaman Law Firm in California. Rick and his firm, Rick in particular, is really a highly specialized practitioner in eminent domain law. So in a nutshell, just in terms of what is this about, the lawsuit on behalf of Hart was filed in 2018. And it should have been, but it has not turned out to be, a fairly simple, straightforward taking of less than 2 acres of land in Ward Village. And it's the basically the Mauka Eva section. Rail comes down Halikuila, crosses Ward, cuts across a very small area that, in our view, is certainly not the prime part of their property. In eminent domain law, you've got appraisals on both sides to value the take area, which was done. Parties have differences of valuation there, and Rick can correct me, but I believe the differences are somewhere between our side thought it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million, and Howard Hughes thought it was twice that. That could have been resolved probably without a lot of gunfire and a lot of attorney's fees, but that didn't happen. When the litigation was filed, Howard Hughes decided to construct, in our view, a claim that is what's called a severance damage claim, and Rick will be more proficient than I in being much more technical about it. But that claim addresses what they believe were damages to the remainder of the property, not just the value of the land taken. And what they constructed, in our view, was a fiction ex post facto litigation-driven claim that by dint of Hart putting the rail line at the Kaka'ako station in the segment of Ward Village, they were hugely damaged to the tune of over $200 million. And without getting into a lot of the detail, what we've called the poster child of this claim is what we call the lost tower. And the Lost Tower was a claim that they developed during litigation that they could have built a 400-foot luxury condominium on the site where the station was going to go, which makes no sense from a common sense standpoint. It doesn't make much sense legally in our view. But where it's focused down really in this litigation is the severance damage claims, which are 9-figure claims. And the gist of it really, which covers most of them in a legal and practical sense, is that when Howard Hughes' predecessor in interest got a master plan permit for all of Ward Village that entitled them to do all kinds of great things, increasing density and building what you can now see there. What General Growth, who would own the property at that time, promised and represented in getting this master plan permit from the Hawaii Community Development Authority is that they would welcome, embrace, and really be delighted to have rail coming through. And they represented that they would plan and design around it. When HCDA permitted this land to do what Howard Hughes has been able to do when they stepped in to own the land, they stated that Howard Hughes would have to address and incorporate the rail line in their planning and development, which in the common sense of those words, whether it's legal or not, means you can't build on the station site, you can't build on the rail site. But Howard Hughes nonetheless came up with this theory that they could do that, and then they developed a claim showing how they lost the tower and how 4 or 5 other projects along the rail line had to be redesigned and redeveloped, which is simply not true. That's the high level. There's a lot more detail, but that's really where the fight is occurring. The law firms, in the months before this case was going to go to trial, filed what we call motions for summary judgment. We asked the trial judge, Judge Tanaki, to throw out all these severance damage claims that were based upon the idea that Howard Hughes could somehow build on or in conflict with the rail line. And he did that. It was about 10 motions. We took them in bite-sized pieces. The judge did a great job, tossed all that out. Howard Hughes filed a motion with the court to have all this go up in appeal. And the judge agreed, the trial judge agreed, thinking it was better to get all this sorted out at one time because it's a lot of money. And so anyhow, we ended up in appeal, briefed the appeal, and 3 weeks ago, we argued all of these in front of the Hawaii Supreme Court. I argued and Rick Rail argued, and I'll let others who, by the way, you can view it. If you haven't viewed it, you can get online and view the arguments. I think we can save some of this for executive session, but what we can say to the public is from our standpoint, we think the arguments went well. The Chief Justice Rechtenwald and the new Justice Eden both tackled Howard Hughes' attorney right out of the block, questioning how could this possibly be that Howard Hughes could construct within the rail line ambit. So our expectation is that we will have a decision from the Supreme Court. You don't have any specific knowledge on that, but probably a couple of months. And if we're successful on all or most of that, it will reshape the case. There will still be a trial. We'll still have to go to trial unless the case gets settled. And so our hope and good thoughts are that we did a good job, that the court will accept our arguments, trim this case down, get rid of what was nothing more than a lottery ticket that Howard Hughes thought they could cash in on by coming up with a preposterous claim. I'll stop. Rick Rail may have other comments, and obviously the board may have questions.
I think Terry has given a pretty good overview. For those who didn't watch or didn't see any of the briefs, which I suspect most of you have not seen the briefs, just to give you a sense of the magnitude of what is before the court. There were, I believe, 10 different appeals that got filed that were eventually consolidated. There were a total of 27 appellate briefs. I think the briefs themselves consumed about 1,000 pages of briefing. So the issues regarding this lost tower were a significant part of it, but there are many other issues before the court as well. Only a few of them actually got argued. during the oral argument 3 weeks ago, but the court is still charged with making decisions on all of the issues raised in those 27 briefs. And so we, one, expect it may be a very lengthy opinion, but also that's why it may take a couple of months or perhaps longer, because there really is a lot going on and a lot of issues at stake. And as Terry said, just to make sure it's clear, regardless of what the Supreme Court does, this case will go back down to the trial court and we will have a trial. The only question is how many issues will still be in play at the trial and how many dollars will still be at stake at the trial. And that's what's being decided by the Supreme Court right now, is which of these legal theories, these damages theories, do get to go before the jury and which ones are not recognized under Hawaii law and therefore do not get to go before the jury. So that's the stage we're in, and we can answer questions, but I'm not sure there's much more to be said in terms of a public discussion.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions about what you've heard publicly? We will also be going into executive session. Do you have something, Anthony?
Just one question. This lawsuit is clearly frivolous. You've described it as a lottery ticket. Assuming that the court finds in our favor, do we have any recourse to reclaim our legal expenses, which are pretty big at this point, correct?
That's a really good question, and we looked at that some time ago. I think the answer is no within this context. Many times, if you have a claim where somebody's seeking a lot of money under Hawaiian law, as the chair knows, you do have a right to come back and get your fees back, but subject to either Paul or Rick telling me I'm wrong. I think so far we haven't come up with a viable solution.
Any other questions, members? If not, I assume that the sentiment of the board is you would like to go into executive session so you can have the briefing by the attorneys. So with that, Chair, I would, yes.
We go into executive session.
Yes, and so the motion is the board will enter into executive session pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute Section 92-4, subsection 92A3. And this is, of course, to deliberate concerning the authority of persons designated by the board to conduct labor negotiation or negotiate the acquisition of public property or during the conduct of such negotiations, and subsection 92-5A4 to consult with its attorneys on questions and issues and matters pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, and immunities. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Mr. Sniffen. So moved and seconded. Any further discussion among the members? Natalie, we will note your statement. With that, members, do we have unanimous consent to go into executive session? We do. Members will be moving into executive session. I believe we stay because of rail. Is that correct? And Natalie, I gave you wrong instructions, so Cindy will move you into a breakout room, so you don't have to leave. So you'll be moved into a breakout room. Thank you and welcome back. We are on agenda item number 6, which is the status report in City and County of Honolulu, acting by and through the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation versus Victoria Ward Limited, civil number 18-1-1564-10 JMT. We were in executive session and we were briefed by our attorneys, including Mr. Rail on Zoom, on the status of the Supreme Court arguments which were heard at the end of June in this matter. And with that, the members of the board asked their questions regarding what this status means and how it will affect the project itself. Having said that, that is in compliance with the Sunshine Law, and thank you very much for your time, Mr. O'Toole, Mr. Oki, and Mr. Rail.
And thank you for your hard work on
Thank you very much. And we're holding you to the 2 to 3 months. And every month we go over that,
There'll be a fine.
we're gonna ask for a discount.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Members, we're now moving to agenda item number 7, briefing in Shemek Taylor Granite JV versus Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation, John Doe's, Jane Doe's, Doe Corporation, Doe Nonprofits, and Doe Government Agency, civil number 1 CCV-23-000876. So Nate?
Thank you, Chair. Aloha, Nate Meddings, Project Director. I'm going to attempt to do the same thing Terry did, give a high-level overview for public consumption, and then probably go to privileged communication, an executive session. So essentially, this claim, if you will, or this agenda item is broken up into 2 distinct delay events. Essentially, it has to do with utilities that are mounted on an overhead pole on Ulalena Street and Hiko Zone 8 down there in the airport section. The utilities per contract are to be coordinated and relocated by the design builder, who is STG. Essentially, that lack of coordination and the lack of getting the overhead lines to underground lines caused a delay event where the guideway could not be erected because the gantries could not go through. The second delay event was due to quality issues related to HECO infrastructure, but per contract, again, it was the responsibility of the design builder to construct the HECO infrastructure to the quality standards, both of HECO and the city. So essentially, once the infrastructure was constructed, it was found that it does not meet the clearance standards, and there was rework required to remedy that before we could pull down and power the HECO infrastructure. So again, it's pretty clear in the contract, both of those fall under the responsibility of the design builder, who is STG. So it was those 2 distinct delay events and all the associated costs that add up to that $97 million claim that was submitted publicly. I would like to note and reiterate that in order to try to avoid this in the future, that is the whole essence of why we awarded the CCUR projects. It's to get utilities out of the way of the design builder. If those guys stop, it costs us a lot of money. So essentially, CCUR has approved plans and awarded lump sum contract with associated LDs. And that's how we're ensuring that this doesn't happen through City Center. So City Center, as the design build, looks different than what the AGS design build did, because we're moving utilities out of the way. So as far as risk mitigation in the future, that is how we are trying to award those contracts, to really reduce that risk, hopefully avoid it altogether. But those 2 high-level distinct delay events are what created this claim. And on May 11th, I presented to you guys that there was a high possibility that we would be going to litigation with the STG claim. We are just too far apart. The contract is very clear about the responsibility of the design builder needing to relocate those utilities, and we are standing by the contract. And I think, barring any additions from Kathleen or from Core or any questions that we can talk about publicly, that was my very high-level overview of the 2 delay events.
Yes, Roger.
This is not going to the legal matter, so I think I can do it openly. But your comment that by separating out the utility relocation from the guideway construction in the increment we're on right now, reduce the risk or reduce the chance of having a claim doesn't make sense to me, because if the original design build contract made the contractor responsible for both the utility relocation and the construction, why would separating them? I understand that from a purely that the more you get done, the less the risk is, but wouldn't there also be the possibility that by combining them in a sort of a design build way, that you would have a better outcome? So I'm just not sure why if they're responsible for both of the items, that the risk is reduced.
Sure. So this is probably the most common area where design build contracts go to litigation. It's performance of utility relocations. We have learned here through the P3 process and the attempts to award CCGS that the design builders aren't coming here to relocate utilities. They want to do guideways and stations. And, we have proven that the new Hart under Lori's leadership is in a better position to work with the city utilities and relocate them. So by separating those out, we're essentially clearing the path for the design builder, right? If you lump them together, that's what creates this situation. In executive session, I'll explain that a little bit more because I don't want to jeopardize our case. But although you put all the responsibility on the design builder to relocate utilities, it is probably the most common design build case that goes to litigation is the lack of utility performance associated with that, if that makes sense.
I mean, the lack of the actual utilities.
So that's
the lack of the design builders.
So that's a very good distinction, and we have both of those cases in this instance. So a lot of times the utilities relocate their own utilities, right? The third-party utilities. HECO, the design builder, is responsible for doing the infrastructure, and then they have somebody in the specialty high voltage contractors come in and actually run the cables through the infrastructure. And in this case, the second delay event that I talked about was the quality issues related to SDG's infrastructure they placed on the ground. So the previous one was an AT&T line that was on the pole where the contract puts coordination and due diligence on the design builder to understand how many lines are on that pole and to design it and relocate that. In that instance, AT&T does the relocation, but they have to design it and they have to coordinate that with the utilities. So both those instances you described contributed to that delay event.
Any other questions, members? Yes.
Quickly, is the reason that this step was taken now because the statute of limitations was about to run out and they needed to get there? In other words, were you guys making progress, but despite the progress, they thought, oh, well, we're about to run out of time, we better file now? Or had you ceased to make any progress?
Yeah, real good question. So backing up on the history, the first delay event started delaying the project in December of 2020. And all that was resolved approximately a year later, both delay events. This was actually the number one risk on the AGS project that we reported since 2021. Since April of last year, we started to report it as the largest issue on that project. And then in January of 21, essentially, we've been trying to negotiate at the project level. We couldn't come to an agreement simply because they're asking for 97 million. We think we owe them much less than a third of that. And so we tried to get them to abide by the contract and see that. That was unsuccessful. We brought in the executives, their executives, Lori, and we tried to work through that. Again, they're just chasing a dollar value, so it was unsuccessful. They had threatened to go to litigation many times. That's just the world that we live in. I would say about 2-3 months ago, we were still in hope that the project team could come up with a global settlement that would be fair. We're not willing to come to you guys and try to justify anything more than we think is fair. So we actually have not budged from the number we thought was fair a year ago. And they have gone up and down, but, and I'll say that they've readily admit, we're chasing a price tag. We're asking for 97, but they know they don't deserve 97, and they've readily admitted that and said, hey, if you settle where we settled on one, for cents for a dollar, we'll be okay. But Lori said on that Wednesday meeting, the day before they filed the complaint, is we have to justify every tax dollar spent, and I cannot justify any more dollars than we already offered you. And they said, okay, then that's what it is. 2 weeks previous, they had threatened to take us to litigation the day before we opened the segment. And we said, if that's your guys' tact on this, then go right ahead. We're marching forward with progress. And luckily they didn't. We do appreciate that. And that's where it finally bubbled up. You know, it's been threatened for a while, and I think they finally pulled the trigger on that. It doesn't change what we still think is fair. And we're just too far apart from that, which we'll get into in executive session.
To answer your question though, Anthony, yes, it felt like they had until September and they were running out of time. So that's probably what triggered this.
Is there any type of arbitration clause in these contracts?
So we are still hopeful that when we go to mediation, so there's a mediation clause, and we're hoping to go to mediation in August, September, and we're still hopeful that that moves the needle and that we're able to get resolution.
That's the court-ordered mediation phase, right? Or is that a contractual?
No, I don't think so. Contractual.
Can you offer up to the limit that was legally allowed written in the contract?
We went through all the delay events, the associated costs, and we were reasonable with our approach. You know, our end goal was try to reduce risk and settle with what's appropriate. And so we went through, and the contract is pretty clear about the responsibility to relocate those. And we had outside counsel on retainer for these, and we brought outside counsel in, and they've been studying the case for 6 to 8 months with.
Yeah, just careful about outside counsel.
Okay. 10-4. So we brought in experts to study the contract and the case, and they concur with us that the contract is very clear that both of those are the responsibility of STG. Thank you, Dan. Still too much. All right.
Okay, so members, we can go into executive session, and that way, you know, you won't be hindered in any way by the questions that you ask. So would you like to move into executive session? Right.
What do you expect the schedule to be now that they filed litigation? What do you expect this public steps to be so that everybody can hear what we think is going to happen?
So Kathleen's probably a better one to answer, or Dan, or actually Chair, or somebody with a higher legal IQ and that's been there before. But we're hoping in the next 2 months we can try to solve it through mediation. But then if it goes to litigation, discovery can last 1 year to 2 years, and then ultimately, you know, typically these things settle before they actually go to litigation. But sometimes it's 3 to 5 years before you get there.
So the next step is mediation, and we would expect that to happen within this calendar year.
Yes.
So we're hoping for August that the mediator is available.
But as far as schedule goes for critical items, that's complaints only related to those delay events. So we're able to bifurcate and separate the project team and finish in segment 2. Very confident we're going to be open in 2 years through the airport. That's our priority and our focus. STG is a part of that, and they're out there continuing to work.
The lawyers are going to do the lawyer thing. The workers are going to do the worker thing.
Yeah, when you get out there in the field, it's everyone sharing the same man list and trestle bridge, and they're just trying to finish. You know, they don't care about what the executives are caring about. So that's a good sign.
Did you have something?
Just an opinion. I mean, thank you for sticking to your guns. We're not a bottomless pit. We're not a soft touch, and I'm glad that you're making that clear to the contractors.
Anyone else? Nate, I think this is in the public realm. When I reviewed the STG lawsuit, it seemed to be concentrating on basically delays. First of all, it was delay claims, and secondly, it was attributed to whether HECO reviewed the plans or HECO did whatever, or HECO changed the specs on you. Would that be a summary for the public as to what seemed to be the essence of the STG claim?
The actual delay events were through construction. The complaint tries to focus on design for a reason, in my opinion, and shift that the delay was actually for construction. As it relates to HECO, it was infrastructure, a duct bank that was placed that did not meet clearance issues that actually required chipping up in some instances and rework. And so whether, you know, that I think design's irrelevant when it comes to constructing something that doesn't meet standard.
You know, I remember John Moore testifying that he believed part of the problem was that HECO was demanding larger vaults than he felt was necessary. And as a result, he was standing firm as to what it was.
Yeah, and that's, so we've already settled on one delay event with STG, and that was titled very similar. HECO Zone 8 Equitable Adjustment was the official title. And that was for that. That was for delays and prolonged design, you know, through the design phase. But all that was resolved by the time we got to construct it and constructed the infrastructure. That has nothing to do with the clearance issues that were found there.
So the issues that we face, because part of this is YY Loop, right? The
Yes.
YY Loop
Yes.
area. And YY Loop had all of those issues regarding basically electrical matters. So is that part of the claim that we're facing with this right now? The YY Loop claims?
Yeah, God, you want to just come up here real quick? So I'm gonna introduce you exactly right. So John Moore, those who don't know, was our best construction manager, you know, that I've met in my life. So he was our premier design build project manager. He passed away last April, I believe, but he was the project manager. Scott Rostek, come on up here. Scott Rostek was his RE, so the entire time he was there. So he worked under John Moore for 4 years. Scott's wife made him move back to Denver. We then, about a year and a half ago, said, hey, can't you come here and work on the Heart Project? You're the closest thing we had to John Moore. So for about a year, so Scott is he's the construction manager for all of Stantec. And so the question, do you want to repeat the question? Or?
If you can repeat the question, that works.
So my question was whether or not we had YY Loop. YY Loop had a lot of these electrical issues, and whether or not that was part of the problems that we see in the complaint. Because the complaint, as I read it, focused a lot on basically HECO delays in approvals and also the demands that were being done. So is that a correct assessment as to what was going on and what they're suing for? In other words, the SCG is suing for.
That's a correct assessment for what they're trying to sue for. However, that was resolved with TIA1. So when John Moore explained to the board in September of last year, with the increased demand, with increased size of manholes, the demand loads,
right,
that was all related to design. So that was taken care of, but it is included in the complaint.
But it is included.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it in the complaint. So what you're saying is that part of the complaint was already settled,
Correct.
right? So, okay, so what is left? Because a lot of that complaint is about HECO and HECO's, and I remember, and you all know, John Moore was very dear to me too. I grew up on him in the whole Hart family. But I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, as the complaint is worded now, and I'm sure you guys have read the complaint, what is truly, in your opinion, the essence? I'm not asking for a legal opinion. I'm just saying, as you, the engineers working on this project, and you read that complaint, what do you think it comes down to?
So, in reality, Scott's right. Those issues through the design phase is why we settled on the first delay claim with TIA1, because we thought there was...
How much was that settlement, by the way?
34 million.
That's right. I remember it was a 30-something
Yeah,
million somewhere.
and that was to get us through the design phase. But then everything was approved. STG knew what they were constructing and knew the tolerances and clearances. And then they went and constructed the duct bank. And then it was found to have quality issues. So... our hunch is that they keep trying to go back to the design because that's where they think they have a better argument, but they constructed it not even per the design.
Okay. So, and you think that what they're claiming with the 90 some odd million includes that, or is a substantial portion of it that?
No, what they're claiming for the 97 million has nothing to do with that. So it's erroneous in the complaint.
No. I'm not saying that they're valid. I'm just saying, does that comprise the 90-something million that they're claiming in the complaint?
No, so the 97 million is basically for what they're saying is 100% heart delay for that entire time, for basically a year. And they're saying all their equipment's on standby. They had to buy more equipment, they had to, all their crews were extended overheads. So basically they're claiming for the damages associated with time.
Yeah, I understand that, but I thought their claim for damages associated with time was due to HECO.
In the complaint?
In their complaint.
Yes, that
That's
is what
right.
they're
I'm not
claiming.
saying they're
Yeah, yeah.
correct.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just saying the 90-something million is for delays, and in the delay claims, it's all attributed primarily to HECO, right?
About half of it. The first delay event, the overhead lines to underground that delayed the gantry coming through the guideway was an AT&T line.
Okay.
And that AT&T line delayed from December to March of 21. And then the HECO infrastructure construction delayed it from March to August.
August.
Yeah.
And that totals 90-something million,
Yes.
right? Okay. Okay, members, anything else? And I think we should probably go into executive session so that Dan Gluck doesn't get nervous. So anything else, members? If not, I assume somebody will make a motion that we go into executive session on, oh wait, before I forget. Is there anyone here to testify on agenda item number 7? Nobody? Okay, so let's now proceed. So members, I assume somebody will make a motion. So moved. And the motion is that we will enter executive session pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statutes 92-4, subsection 92A3, to deliberate concerning the authority of persons designated by the board to conduct labor negotiations or to negotiate the acquisition of public property or during the conduct of such negotiations, and subsection 92-5A4, to consult with attorneys on questions and issues of matters pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, and immunities. Is there a second?
Chair, I second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent? We have unanimous consent. We will be going into executive session. We are staying here or we're moving in? We're staying here. So everyone who isn't relevant, please leave. Thank you, members. We're back, and the public, we're back. So I'm gonna move because we're running out of time. I'm gonna lose people, and I think there's some issues that we need to discuss. So number 8 and number 9 are going to be deferred. So number 10, May monthly progress report, Nate. If you can make it very quickly. Any members of the public want to speak on agenda item number 10? Nobody, right? Cindy? Okay, so Nate, please give it as quick as you can. I'm losing at 3:45.
All right, can do. Thank you, Chair. Aloha, Nate Mennings, Heart Project Director. I'm going to go through the May progress report. I will be brief this month, but I'm going to take the opening comments to heart, and I'm going to try to tailor the reporting
No
based on
pun
those comments.
intended, right?
All right, no pun intended. Keep it on track. But I will try to take those comments to heart and try to be more thorough in my reporting when time permits. But for today, please go to the key issues section as we typically do, which is on page 5. And I'll just go in order. The first one talks about CCUR for Dillingham's progressing as planned. There's still no indication that they're anything but on schedule. They are almost done relocating the first of the critical activities with the AT&T line. If you guys are out there, you'll see that a couple nights ago we did a traffic flip on CCUR that goes past the Costco parking lot. So causing more pain there, but going through as quick as possible. Okay.
Moving better in front of Costco.
All right.
The double lane goes farther.
Yes, perfect. So we'll continue to monitor that. The second bullet is CCUR3, so our downtown project. Coluccio's been a great contractor to work with. We're actually still showing that our estimated completion is going to be on schedule, but more confidently at the original contract value. So I personally think that work's going to tailor a little bit beyond the schedule, but well ahead of when we need them to finish for the design builder to come on board. All right, so to finish out the CCUR contracts, this third bullet is CCUR4 electrical work. So we are meeting this schedule and will post the CCUR4 electrical at the end of next week is our hope, but certainly before the end of July. The first week of August, we'll have a pre-bid meeting with the contractors. You guys are welcome. I will announce that once we have that date, but I do think it'll be the 1st in August. So your high voltage specialty contractors, it will be there. We're going to actually do some outreach with 1260 and their counterparts to ensure that we get enough people there at the pre-bid. CCUR3, of course, you guys approved the electrical change order, so appreciate that from the board level. That work is getting through final negotiation and ordering the long lead material, which is the true critical aspect of CCUR3 electrical. Hammerheads, of course, that retrofit work is complete. It's been approved by all entities. Thank you for our stakeholders, including the board, but Ed, especially the HDOT crew, was fantastic working through that process. So we really appreciate that, but that's been buttoned up and all those have been validated and corrected. The next bullet talks about basically segment 2. So Hitachi has started installation on the guideway and the stations in the airport segment. We're all looking forward to seeing a train out there that's being towed by the end of the year. So that's a big milestone. The way the progress is going, we think we can get a train out there by the end of the year. And that gives us a year and a half of testing to be open in mid-year 2025 through the airport. The second to last bullet talks about all the stuff that was preceding opening. So we got our final SSCBR, which is our safety certificate. Of course, we had a successful opening. Roger, really good job on that. Thanks for helping us get there and looking forward to continued progress on segment 2 opening. CCGS, part 1 was posted April 4th. The part 2 is planned for October 26th. We haven't had any slips. I'm sorry, it's the part 1 is due October 26th and part 2 is expected to go in November based on that. We expect award to happen in probably a year from now. So I think summertime of next year. That's basically our critical path going from Dillingham Utilities into CCGS procurement and construction. Just due to time's sake, I'll happily address questions and we'll walk through any details of the report.
Any question, members? Yes.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Nate, for the summary. I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to ask the question. You could respond later on if it's. So if I turn to page 55 of the project report, compared to page 33 under CCUR. On page 33, it shows about 300,900,000 incurred. But if I add up the numbers on page 55, it only comes out to like $130 million.
Of cost incurred?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could.
No, so the cost incurred to date, if you look at the contract page, which I believe is 33.
Yeah, that's the page I'm
Yeah,
looking.
it captures non-FFGA costs. So those are costs on CCUR1 that are outside the Civic Center scope. Sorry, I'll pull that. Thank you, Lori.
Oh, really? Because when I look at the total project cost, it's really the FFGA number or the recovery plan number.
So 33 and
55.
Okay, so 33 is grouped together by SCC code.
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
I
yeah. So
understand.
there's
And 55 is by CPP.
yes. So within like the award of CCUR Dillingham,
Yes.
there's more elements than just utilities. There's like final paving, et cetera. And then in the SCC code for utilities, that's spread around a bunch of different CPPs. So like, for example, like in
No,
the-
no, I understand,
Okay.
but I also look at the total value of 40.02 under 33, right? So it comes pretty close to the 3 DBBs you have for utility relocation. I mean, it's pretty close. It's like $50 million off.
Okay.
So, but then the incur, they're just a big difference. But you could take a look at it and report back the next time.
Yeah, let me look at that.
Yeah, and the other thing is, because the incur is about 300 million, and if I subtract 100 million from the previous CCUR contract, so that comes up to 200 million. And that's approximately 20% of the contract value that you pay out, right? Or a little bit more than 20% that you pay out. But in your write-up on page 27, so on the Dillingham, the completion rate is only 8.4%. And for downtown is is 13.6%. So I just want to know how those two numbers tie in, that you pay more than 20% of the value of the two contracts combined, but the physical percentage of work completed is much lower than that. So anyway,
Basically, these curves right here that you see on the screen, they're tracking earned value, and that is physical percent complete in the field. So, early contract costs include like mobilization, and those soft costs to get up and running, bonds, insurance. Those are kind of excluded when we look at pure percent complete, because those are just costs to get going. Those are outside of putting quantities in the ground. So this curve is intended to just look at infrastructure going into the ground. So usually you pay more than percent complete, especially at the beginning due to those upfront costs.
Yeah, you have the upfront costs, and that's why when you stop and start a project, it's a lot more expensive than you just keep going.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Out of like the 217, there's about 170 to 180 that's true like quantity in the ground costs. The rest are like the management costs and just time related costs.
Okay, all right. I mean, I have other questions, but time constraint, I could ask next time.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
From the recovery plan now.
Yes, so those have been all updated.
Everything's updated to the recovery plan, correct?
It should be, yes. And it shouldn't, so anything that has, so basically every contract page should be broken out with a FFGA cost and then a non-CIP cost if applicable.
You replanned from that date. You didn't do anything with the stuff before,
So
correct?
if you look at, and this is something that Robert asked me, is the Hitachi contract page, it shows 4.5 years late. And that's because, we've updated the scope and the elements to the recovery plan, but not the contractual end date yet. And so once the FFGA is approved, we'll then negotiate that. But yeah, from a cost perspective, it all should be broken out for the
From a
recovery.
schedule perspective, you didn't give them any schedule relief until you get the recovery plan approved. Yeah.
Yes,
Got
but
it.
overall schedule is the recovery plan.
Yeah, there was a few things like that Hitachi thing that were in there that I want to make sure.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony?
Just a quick one on staffing. Obviously, be paying a lot of attention to staffing. It looks like you've been able to fill a lot of pukas, but one that I've been concerned about is Director of Project Controls. Pretty important. Where are we on that?
Recruiting, we're recruiting city staff, consultant staff. We're approaching the point of just overpaying for a consultant to come here. We're not there yet. So, essentially what we're getting is because work's so good everywhere, agencies are overpaying, especially in the project controls world. And so to get people to move here, they're asking outrageous price tags to get them here. But we've been able to successfully hire and promote support staff in project controls to help Vance and I share the load there. But that's an area that we're actively recruiting, definitely.
Is it hindering your operations at all that you don't have a director there at the moment?
No, so the construction teams have taken the burden of a lot of the project controls reporting. Vance and I do a lot of project control stuff. It will be good to download that to somebody else and get that off our plate, but for now, we know where the big risks are and we're paying attention to that. It will be nice to fill that role.
Thanks, Jim.
I come from the school of keep it simple. So you have a lot of data here. It takes a lot of time to do it. Who uses it?
It's an FTA deliverable, but they don't use everything that's in here. And we've gone through with the FTA and made this about half of what it used to be. But like, you know, if you look at these health gauges, they probably don't mean a lot to a lot of people around here. And this is still left over from the Glenn O'Hara days. It's something that we found he was able to find it valuable on the board at that time, but I'll happily page turn this and look at like how we can improve this. Because I mean, you know, if it's not serving its purpose, let's just find something else that you guys would prefer to see. Yeah.
Dashboard.
There you go.
We've tried many times to find this. That's my niece laughing, you know, everyone has taken a stab and cut this down, get it down to 2 pages, 3 pages, and then we're back to this.
Trying, yes. Definitely don't want to soak up mic time with Nate, but open to any suggestions. So with the previous board members and other projects, you know, we would do periodic page turns, even if it's annually or biannually, and understand what people look at. If you guys aren't looking at it and the FTA is not looking at it, let's just quit doing it and find something that is valuable. Happy to do that anytime.
Last comment, hopefully, just kudos to both Hart and to HDOT for getting in those pedestrian improvements at the Pearl Highland Station. Got to be a tight schedule at the end, but you guys got it done, and kudos to both agencies.
Hey, since we're on the subject of pedestrian safety, why do we have speed bumps at the crosswalk and not before? I mean, I would imagine by the time you get to the crosswalk,
we have them
it's
both,
too late.
Robert. We
No.
I mean, at Pearl Highlands?
No, I'm just talking about in
Oh,
general.
you're talking in general, like
Yeah.
Polly. He just put Polly.
Yeah, like, yeah, I mean, I'm just curious. I'm sure there's a reason behind it. I always thought by the time you hit the bump, you're hitting the pedestrian, right?
So typically, when you start looking at speed bumps prior to, space law prior to those crosswalk areas, what's found nationally is when you hit the speed bump, you speed up until you hit the next one. That crosswalk is in the middle zone where you speed up. So the best case scenario that we've seen nationally is having that speed or that speed table at the crosswalk. It elevates the pedestrian in the driver's mind. It conditions that driver to slow down every time they come to that area as a potential crosswalk. So that's the intent. What we found nationally also is it's a higher level of yielding at a speed table on a crosswalk versus speed bumps prior to.
Oh.
But in cases where we cannot get that raised pedestrian crosswalk installed because of ADA requirements or drainage and the like, the second best thing to do is put in speed humps prior to.
Yeah. The only reason I noticed was I was in California over the last weekend, and I noticed most speed bumps are like before the crosswalk instead of right on the crosswalk. So anyway, that's why I asked.
Maybe like Vegas and put straight sidewalks in and like the thing goes straight up like this and comes back down.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
Slow
yeah.
down for those.
Since he was talking about pedestrian safety, it just kind of reminded me.
Is there a reason Ed you said nationally?
Yeah. I always look at everything first locally, then nationally to see if there's other data we can pull in, then I'll look at it again. So when there's national data that shows that something might work, we'll try it here. But we'll base everything on local data. Oh, we do.
So when I worked for Palo Alto, they spent $1 million trying to slow down traffic around the school, and they did all kinds of experiments. All they had to do is put in speed bumps, and it would slow the traffic.
That's the thing. So a lot of people want to go high tech, which is cool, but low tech works quite well.
Very well. Kapilani Boulevard, McKinley, I always slow down because speed bumps are there.
All righty, anything else for me? Not, you know what, I think we're losing people, so what do we have left? Full funding grant. Okay, Joey, you don't have anything, right? You have anything? Okay. And then she gave him out. I was gonna give you a pass, but.
I went to go look at it.
Okay, Joey,
Good
make
afternoon.
your report.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. One thing to report, a new development out on Dillingham Boulevard. The left turns into Ahi Street. If you're traveling westbound on Dillingham, are now restricted. As a result of our extending the work zone down to Ahi Street. Last week, we flipped the work zones from the Mackay side of the street to the Malka side of the street. And we also extended it out to Ahi Street. And the traffic control plans now require us to implement that left turn restriction. We are working to mitigate the impact with the area businesses. We will have a dedicated, or we do have a dedicated special off-duty officer to manage some type of controlled access for the local business service and delivery vehicles. We've distributed alternative flyers, alternative access flyers to all the businesses. We did the outreach. We've also made the adjustments on Google and Apple Maps. And Apple Maps has already been implemented. Google should be updated by tomorrow.
So what's I guess a landmark on Ka'ai Street so we know what street it is?
Okay, so maybe the IHS Women's Shelter. Not quite Jollibee's. Not quite Jollibee's. It's between Jollibee's and Costco. But there's a
I wish my boyfriend would surf or something.
yeah, it's right across the street. There's a sign that says that. Yes.
Oh, so that's the one that's painted on the side of the.
Yeah, there's like
Okay,
a gas.
okay.
There's like a ratty gas station
Okay,
over there.
okay. By the way, anybody here to testify on agenda item number 10 or agenda item number 11? Seeing none, nothing. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Joey? Not? Thank you, Joey. So our next item is agenda item number 12, which is the full funding grant agreement process update. Vance and Nate. Do we need to go into executive session for your update? Okay. Go ahead, whichever one of you. Wait, anybody here to testify on agenda item number 12? Full funding grant agreement amendment process update. And no one online. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
So first, I'd like to apologize to Michelle for not returning her calls. Did not get any missed calls from you, but I can give you my
We talked at the
opening. Okay. Apologies for that. So in regards to the environmental reevaluation tied to the FFGA amendment, the NEPA process, we are looking at a completion in that early to mid-August timeframe. Currently, the 4F document is under review with Department of Interior. Concurrently, we are working on the HEPA documentation. We did meet with the governor's office 2 weeks ago to talk through the process and what's expected. In the coming days, we submitted a draft of the documentation to the governor's office earlier this week for their review, initial review and comments. We're expecting comments to come back by the end of this week. With all that said, we are expecting to complete the environmental clearances in September, with presenting to the board the FFGA amendment in the September board meeting. Once that's complete, the FFGA will then go to City Council for review and approval.
Okay. Any questions? Anyone? Yes, Michelle.
Okay, so last time, you said you were gonna check, I think it was whether you could tell me how the procurement is related to FFGA approval and funding. Do we have an answer to that yet?
So my understanding is to submit part two, the environmental reeval needs to be done, but not the FFGA needing to be executed. It just needs to be a potential lawsuit needs to be done in order to move forward with part two.
So you don't have to actually secure the FFGA funding to put out the procurement.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Okay, next. Wow, that's unusual. Okay, next question. Do we have to go for the 60-day notice to the House and Senate subcommittees and committees and retransmit like we did in 2012 for all the signatures for the FFGA approval?
We'll get a review of that.
It was more time towards when do you need the FFGA to be approved? But if you're telling me you don't even need it to be approved to send out the procurement, then you don't need it until you need the money, right?
That's because the
Which tells me-
procurement started, right? And
No,
so
the RFP didn't go out, so
Yeah.
the procurement.
part one's already out in April. So the procurement started, but going into part two,
Yeah.
Core told us we can't go into part two until the environmental reeval process is complete. But
And then you can do it.
yes, and the FFGA gets us the funding, but we don't need that cash right now, especially going through the procurement process.
Because it's already congressionally approved based on the first FFGA, and this is kind of an update. I mean, basically, the FFGA, when I read through that giant, long FTA document that tells you how to submit one and what it's for, it says it kind of goes with the president's budget in February. And so they know which of these giant rail projects and transportation projects they're going to try to put forward the next year. They put it into the budget with the president's budget, saying these are the FFGAs we're going to be putting forward this year so that Congress can allocate the money appropriately,
Is
right?
that new funds, Michelle? Because ours is already allocated.
Yours
So
is
ours
already,
is already
but it
allocated.
still has to
So
be appropriated every year.
But the FTA NURIA has that authority, so we don't need to go. So as I'm thinking about your question, your original question, I don't think all of that process needs to go through.
It doesn't, but you still have to get it given to you. So because they're withholding it, it's sort of like an executive
That's
agency.
NURIA's
Right,
authority.
it's an executive agency withholding
Yes.
it. So,
Right.
but how do you get it out of the executive agency, and what requirement do you have?
It's gonna be put in a grant.
That's the FFGA. That's
No. I don't know how much I can share.
what grant agreement are they signing if it's not the full funding grant agreement?
We should go into executive session.
Okay, so that's the question is, what do you need to get the money? What needs to get signed so you have the money so you can like start, so you can start sending stuff out. I understand that it's been appropriated, and so you can go through probably with the RFP process, everything else, but until you cannot actually let the contract until the executive agency releases the money, even though it's sitting there for you, right? That's the question that I have. And so I'm looking for a schedule that says,
Right, if we can get funds elsewhere, whether it's the GET, TET, or bonds, or
but you have
TCP,
to
right?
prove that you have all the money in, at least for, you have to prove that you have the money. That's my question. It's basically like, I kind of was looking for a schedule saying, this is when I need it done by, and this is why, and then here's all the steps that I need to take to get it. That's kind of,
We would like it all done by October. That's what Vance's schedule is saying. We would like it all done by October. That's when the second part of the,
Maybe what Michelle is talking about is that we said in the recovery plan that what we would prefer is that, and I think what the FTA came back with is they said, okay, once the FFGA amendment is quote approved, then we get the first tranche, right? $125 million. And then after that, the question was, when do we get the remaining 200 and something 50 million and another 250? So I think maybe that's what Michelle is saying, because if we're going to get this money, how do we get it, and what do we have to hit to get it?
you have to hit to get it, and then like like a more financial kind of question, did you like make sure that the lumps of money that you have from TAT and GET and coming in from these other things can pay all the bills based on when the
That's
contracts
the
are coming
cash
in?
flow, that's the
And
cash flow report.
Can you let a contract knowing that you don't have the money yet, right? You can't. You have to prove that you, at least that you have the plans, that the money's supposed to drop in at that time,
That's
right?
what the cash flow reports are for, and the,
Right.
the
And so
capital
depending on how
budget.
and the way you structure is usually you share with them sort of enough information so that they kind of match what you think you're gonna do. But we're not getting the second dump until share.
To your question, so 125 is when the amendment is approved, and then the 250 is when CCGS is awarded, and then they haven't given us milestones for the remaining, but they said it's gonna be in fiscal year. But they said they're gonna give us milestones, but they haven't as of yet, so it's gonna kind of mimic the recovery plan. I think 25, 26, 27, 125, 125, 119, something like that.
So are they gonna give us the smaller amounts after that? Because remember, the original tranche structure for the recovery plan that they had proposed was like 100 million, 100 million, 100, versus we had wanted it all at one time, but they said, so, but then we said, okay, we'll settle for 3 tranches.
Right. Initially, when we did the recovery plan, they said 125 upon approval of the FFGA.
Right.
125 a year or so later for the award of CCGS. And then like 125 a year.
Right.
They actually accelerated. Now it's 125 for the FFGA, 250. So they accelerated 125
When you let the contract.
when we award the contract.
Award the contract. But you didn't get the 125 because the FFGA is not signed yet.
Yes, that's correct.
So I'm still kind of back to the, how do we get the FFGA signed? Where's the schedule for that? And who has to sign it? And when do they have to sign it by? Because I need that 125 in this next calendar, in the next
I don't
calendar
know
year.
if the money is the issue with the award of the issuance of the RFP. Right. It's 2 separate issues.
No, I agree with that now. I understand that. But it still is, you can't let a contract, you cannot award a contract until you have the money, right?
Our understanding is from CORE, we can release part 2 once the FFGA is approved.
You can negotiate all the way up to it, but you can't award it probably.
But we don't have to have the money to release the RFP.
Okay, so show me so that's
Okay.
your new schedule. So when
So on
do
the
you need the money
schedule,
by?
what we're planning right now is bring it to the board, I think for September 8 meeting. Then assuming it gets approved by the board, take it to council in October. By that time, the FTA has told us they'll be ready to sign it. And the people who sign it is Lori, CORE, and they've already reviewed it, the mayor,
So.
and then the FTA administrator.
My notes are horrible. So back to the, do I need 60 days notice to Congress like I did before? Because I don't see a waiver process for that.
Oh,
But we're not gonna get the money until sometime later. They'll release the money once it gets signed, but then we have to go through a grant submission process. So it'll be a little while after that before we actually get the funding. And we have to submit invoices because they don't just write us a check.
Right.
They reimburse. So FFGA will release the funding, then we can start the grant process. So the actual funding won't occur probably until, let's say, November-ish. I'm guessing.
So based on my experiences with the state and the city system, it's very different from the federal system. We can negotiate and send out an RFP, but we cannot assign the contract until the money is in hand. Corporation Council has to review the contract, and they will not approve the contract unless money is in hand.
But that requirement of money in hand is not needed until next summer. But you still have to have the money actually in hand, which means the FFG has to have been signed, you have to have whatever, invoices from before, and then you have to have started the process to get the money, correct?
Yeah, so we're planning to hopefully have it signed in October. That's the plan. After council approval, we should be ready to
How
sign.
does it get signed that quickly when you're saying that the pre-review process, we don't have insight into, it's just.
they have it already. FTA has the amendment. They're just sitting on it, waiting for the reevaluation to be done.
So as a grant, the funds have already been allocated by Congress. So the agency has the money. But they're releasing it, allocating the money to the individual
Because
cities.
it's an amendment, not because it's the first time. You don't have to go through all of the same things.
Correct.
Yes.
Could I just make sure I'm clear on, Michelle's question with respect to funding? I just want to make sure we're clear that, at least in the last Finance Committee meeting, HART has the funding available to award whatever contract we want to award. And that was presented in the financial statement. With respect to the 800,000, 746,000 they still owe us. I mean, at some point in time, we would need the money. It doesn't have to be this year or next year or the year after that for us to have the funding to award the contract. I just want to be clear. Those are two separate things that we're talking about.
The FTA does not get held up in a budget showdown thing where you get something that's appropriated but not, or whatever it is. What is it? Come on, Colleen, help me. When you get stuck and they like decide not to appropriate your money, right?
The whole.
No,
No, I mean, like, you don't get stuck when it hits like October 1st and like they still haven't approved the budget.
So you don't have it lapse and you can.
You don't have lapsing funds. You don't have any of that
These
issue.
funds are set to lapse at September 30th. We've already submitted a letter to the FDA requesting that they be extended.
They've been set to lapse for a while, actually.
They keep
Yeah,
extended.
yeah, they
And
keep
we've
getting
been told
extended.
that Nuria has the authority to extend those, and that it's not going to be an issue for her to extend those. We have formally submitted a letter
So
to
the
her
first tranche
requesting.
is an extension of funds that were gonna lapse, generally.
There's been several extensions.
But this is not new funding that you
Correct.
require for the first tranche. The
That's
second
right.
tranche is
And
required.
all of it's.
All of it?
Yes,
Because we're so late.
right. This was all granted back in 20.
This helps. I think I have a better understanding now that the funds are essentially old funds that already are
Right.
appropriated and allocated. You just didn't spend them. So all you have to do is get authority from the agency to
Right.
spend
We
them
need the
now.
document signed, and as we've talked, the document is dependent upon getting the environmental reevaluation done.
Right.
So that's in process, that's what Vance discussed. The document itself, we have drafted, it's been reviewed by the FDA, by the PMOC, by CORE, we made those changes. We submitted, 2 or 3 versions of it right now. The last version we submitted to the FDA was in May, and we shared a copy of that with the chair.
Right, but there's no
They-
substantial changes.
There's no substantial changes, that document's very straightforward, but the FDA has the document now, and they basically have taken ownership of that document. They said we won't distribute another draft of that document until after the environmental reevaluation. is
Right,
complete.
right. And in fact, I was reading the thing and everybody can sign their document separately and then it all still counts as one
Right.
document,
But
blah,
by the
blah.
time
It's all in
we-
this E-Teams thing or whatever it is.
So if the environmental is done in September timeframe, hopefully we'll immediately or soon thereafter get a revised draft, and I'm not even sure if they'll make any revisions to it, but a clean copy of the document from the FDA. That's when we'll circulate to board, then to council. At that time, the FDA will be ready to sign. Barry will be on board. We'll meet with mayor, go over it, and needs his signature, Corey's signature.
So my question to you, Colleen, is if the money is yours and it goes to Lori, why is Lori the grantee official?
She's not.
She's not.
The grantee. Lori's signing as the internet test function.
Oh, she's
Yeah.
signing as a testing official.
Right.
Oh, okay. The mayor's getting the money because Honolulu's getting the money.
Honolulu is good money.
Oh, okay.
No,
Not
we
all.
have to differentiate between obligating the funds for the contract and liquidating the obligation. The GSA at the state level is reviewing the invoices to approve the liquidation of the invoices.
That's why the state legislature did something very similar. So before they release any of the the GET and the TAT funds now, Hart's gotta submit invoices and they've gotta approve the invoice.
So it's core counsel that signs for the grantee's attorney?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what it was in the FFTA in 2012.
Chair.
Yes.
Quick question. So Rick, let's just assume they released the first tranche, 125 million. Are we all set up to download or upload all the invoices so we could draw down the money? Okay.
Like, where's our damn money?
Yeah.
It goes through DPS.
Yeah.
So have her complete the application, and DPS is submitted and reviewed, so it'll take a little time. But in terms of having the invoices ready to submit.
Yeah, okay. Because that process is pretty quick to get the money. As soon as you submit. Oh, yeah, but that's internal, yeah.
You can't pre-line
But once you
all that
upload
stuff. You can
the
pre-line that stuff
invoices,
up or
we
you
get the
can't?
money within like a couple days.
Just said amplification, checks and balances. The people approving the invoices at GSA at the state level are former auditors, so they're very cynical.
Well, and they reject some, and then I have to come back, and then they go back and forth, and then, but the majority of them go through pretty quickly, I think.
I don't know, actually. I don't recall the time they ever.
Anything. I think it's a pretty normal process to upload all the invoices, and you can actually get the money in like a couple days. They may go through their own audit process, but they don't do it before they release the money. The money is actually it's in an account. You could draw it down as soon as you
But to your
have
point,
to.
Robert,
Yeah.
we do have adequate cash flow.
Yeah.
Even if we don't get the 125 for 2 more years, we've got adequate cash flow.
No, we need the money, we need the federal
On
money.
the overall, so the overall project is absolutely, but do we need it per month or within the next 6 months?
No, but you probably need it, don't you're saying for the next 2 years, so in 24, you don't need it at all.
No, we're not planning to do any borrowings until possibly 25, maybe even 26.
You were counting on the 125.
That's correct, but even if we pulled it out, we still have adequate cash flow.
So the project, as we audited, has set aside a huge amount of cash for reserves, and the bonds that were issued have created contingency funds that they can operate from without the grant.
When we get into city center and we start having invoices come through, that's when we will need cash forecast. That's when we need to go out and do some more borrowings. Until then, though,
I don't like borrowings.
well.
Borrowings cost money, right?
That's great.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Not? Thank you very much, and we'll get another update next month.
And
So with that, members, we are adjourned, hearing no objections. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.